All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the online opening of our second annual juried prize show, the Equinox. Our theme this year is balance, and I'd like to introduce Elisa Adams, the president of the New England Sculptors Association board. Elisa, take it away.
Thanks, Vicki. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see everyone, and thank you for coming. The show was juried by our esteemed judges from the Pucker Gallery on Newbury Street. We have Mr. Bernie Pucker. Go ahead, raise your hand. There we go. And we have Rose Montera. She is the Educational and Community Director also at the Pucker Gallery. Hey, Rose, thank you. So let's just jump right in and start the show. Let's see the pieces and what people said about their pieces. And I'm going to just read what everybody's vision was on their piece. So we have Ryan Kelly's piece called Precipice. And Ryan did not comment on his piece to us. Ryan. Okay, next. We have Balancing Act by J.C. Dellenbach. This is a standing figure of a man holding a log over his head while balancing on a ball. On the log, there's a hawk at one end and a squirrel at the other. The sculpture is an illustration of humankind's precarious maintenance of balance of nature. We have Spring by Tona Orbeck, who is on the call with us all the way from Norway. She's our furthest away member. It's very exciting. You can little wave to us, Tona. Thank you for coming. I'm glad it's more, afternoon time for you. Her piece says, inner balance may appear still and calm, yet contains the movement towards certainty of action. And this is also a piece by Tona called calling Sailing My Own Seas. And it's about inner balance gives trust to take off into the wind. Regarding Coral by Rebecca Tuck-McGee, inspired by a documentary about a rapid decline of the world's corals reefs. This is a piece made of trash, bait bags, fish line, and rope that I collected and I weave and sew together. The debris draws attention to the man-made pollution threatening this important ecosystem. And also by Rebecca Tuck-McGee, we have a piece called Prowess. Rackline, a trail of debris that's left on the beach by high tide. I began walking the rackline as a kid with my father, attracted to sea glass and shells, a perpetual seashore treasure hunt. I learned in time that the real treasures were not always as conspicuous. The random debris that washed ashore after spending ages enduring the ocean's chum and grasp held more mystery for me. Foraging at high tide watermarks has metamorphosed into my passion and a catalyst for my work. Fishing lines, rope, lobster cages, and other marine debris are colorful, full of texture, and ready-made to be woven into my assemblage fiber sculpture. But with each bag of jetsam collected, I felt the precarious weight and the impact of marine debris on our ocean. It at times overwhelmed me and became clear that I needed to take more active role in the ocean's protection. Devante by Martina Angela Mueller. An asymmetrical balance is reached by a forward-moving dynamic that expresses courage, Devante, intention, and undeterred perseverance. The horizontal, open, and flowing movements bring levity, grace, and hope into the form. In this time of great unrest with health, freedom, and democracy under attack worldwide, an active inner balance needs to be found. This sculpture expresses uprightness, movement, and courage to speak out. This is Pushing the Limits by Jacqueline Loriot. The male figure is bent over and pushing at the edge of his confinement. He's trying to break free and at the same time maintain his physical and mental balance. Antipodes by Derek Topasky. This piece is named Antipodes because it's so very different from front to back. but the word really means any two places on a sphere which are diametrically opposed to each other, and thus, in an ironic sense, at least, in balance. Pangea Group by Cassie Dion. Pangea Totem Group represents the Earth's strata, oceans, and its peoples. Our multifaceted world is currently faced with environmental disasters, from air we breathe to the depths of its seas to the ground beneath us. The Totem Group is my effort to create awareness in the plundering of our Earth's raw materials and human minds, from mining to fracking and to international struggles for control. The requirement for balance, for equality, and for sustainability within our world has never been more needed than now. And we have Leaves of Grass, also by Cassie Dion. Leaves of Grass celebrates the unique beauty and diversity in our worlds, the need for nature to be in balance. The world is a precious gift, and we must be good stewards of it to preserve it for future generations. As Walt Whitman wrote about his famous book of poems, our world offers us delight and wonder to the senses, for which we must never lose sight or feel gratitude. Conversation by Melanie Zibbett. Keeping a balance in today's world is rather like a conversation where each person is listening and reflecting back what they have heard, seeking to understand the speaker's idea, offering the idea back to the speaker to confirm the idea has been understood correctly. In this way, staying focused helps us slow down, stay in the present moment as a meditation, calming our internal and external worlds. In this bronze sculpture, the two flowing forms create a dialogue between each other, being positive and negative space, rather than the balance we are called upon to do. The next piece is by Natasha Dekareva, sorry. Certainty about uncertainty. The only wisdom is what we let go of trying to know. Comfort must be born from the uncomfortable. You don't need legs to walk nor ears to hear, for into the unknown, there is nothing to fear. This is Contemplation by Linda Hoffman. The figures represent all of humanity seated around this meditative pool. They sit throughout the seasons. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness. They are filled with peace. Returnings by Douglas Gray. The sculpture returnings, many times in our lives, we come to face with having to make difficult decisions as we become more comfortable living in a world or an environment that has changed almost all tenets and beliefs that we instill in us as children. It became an often slow eroding process of foundations and beliefs that we were taught by our parents, schools, and churches. It isn't that all change can't be good. However, for most of us, diminishing of our core beliefs is easier than relying on our own intuitive senses. And as difficult it may be, going back and taking positions for what we know and feel to be right. In other words, returnings. And our last piece is Moon Swing by Douglas Gray. Moon Swing is a steel sculpture measuring 48 inches high, 14 wide by 22 deep. The sculpture relates to the phases of the moon and incorporates swing-like elements that add a bit of playfulness to the piece. Thank you, Vicki. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Bernie Pucker and Rose Montera. Mr. Pucker and his wife are the co-owners of the Pucker Gallery on Newbury Street. It was established in 1967. They exhibit an eclectic and sophisticated collection of works by 50 international artists, featuring ceramics, photography, painting, sculpture, mobiles, and mixed media. So, and Rose is the educational and communications program coordinator for the Pucker Gallery. So I heard from a little birdie that this was an exciting and lively and animated time that both of you had during the show. So I would like to hear from whoever wants to jump in first to speak to that.
Yeah, we'll fight to the death now. It was definitely, first off, thank you for having me and including me. I'm working on the rest of my titles and sort of history for all of this, but it's a real honor to participate in something like this and get to view such wonderful, unique work. So thank you for that. Our process was a battle of sorts. It was really fun because we had sort of our first initial looking at the pieces where we kind of went through on the computer and sort of just spoke to, which ones we found interesting to look at, which ones we liked. It was very, our visceral reactions. And it was interesting to see how much we agreed, but also how much we truly disagreed on kind of which ones spoke to us more. And so once we got down to final 15 and then the final 8 and then top 3, things like that, we started to print out the pieces and words were exchanged. But I am glad that now Mr. Pucker and I are on speaking terms.
Great.
But that was I think a lot of fun. So thank you guys for putting yourselves out there and letting us partake in this journey. We finally again set them all up on the table and I think very democratically took turns kind of turning which ones and kind of making our own piles for which ones we thought kind of spoke to the theme, spoke to the time, and were most engaging with us. So that was sort of our basic process. And again, there were such variety and diversity of works. It was really hard to do that. I was sort of a little bit more stingy with my approach. And I was like, okay, trying to think about the theme and what pieces kind of fit that a little bit more. And Mr. Pucker has so much more experience with all of this, and I'll let him sort of speak to what he was looking for in the works that we chose.
I would begin by saying that Rose, if nothing else, is given to hyperbole on a number of levels, but nonetheless, it was a joy having the opportunity to review the works that were submitted. In general, the gallery probably receives upwards of 300 to 400 portfolios a year. So reviewing work or responding to work is both a privilege and a responsibility that I feel very strongly about, and probably is the most difficult part of the gallery. After 54 years, dealing with clients, dealing with suppliers, shipping, printing, all those things we're used to. But seeing artwork is a very different model. And that has to do with if the artist is in fact pouring who they are into the work that they're creating, then we're either responding to, accepting, or rejecting individuals. And that's a much heavier responsibility, I think, in so many ways. So this is a condensed version of that, meaning having a number of submissions, not necessarily for us to show, but to nonetheless assume that each of the creators was working out of a place of who they are, and they're exposing themselves in a very serious and generous way. It made it both challenging and an opportunity to see people working in a medium, and particularly in sculpture, not for the sake of contemporary world, meaning to try to be cooler than anybody else or do an installation and get a bunch of verbiage that goes with it, but rather with a sense of discipline and a standard of excellence in terms of each of the works that were created. So for that, I want to thank all of you who submitted. I think it is always sobering on my end, as I said at the outset, to have the privilege of looking at work. So that's more or less where I came to the work from, and was interested in engaging Rose in this process because she's not been in the business for 54 years.
Working on it.
Working on it, but to, I think, if nothing else, appreciate the range of quality of work that's being created. And at the same time, then refining her responsiveness to the individual expressions that we saw. So I think that's where she and I are obviously different. And if it didn't happen that way, then it would make no sense. Mm-hmm. Meaning that we each have our own worldviews and our own experiences to bring to the work that we're seeing. So in that sense, I think it was important for her voice to be very much part of this as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So with no further ado, does somebody want to reveal the first award winner?
Yeah, so I think we can go maybe back and forth, and we'll just read down our list. I wish we had a drummer, a drum roll. Maybe I'll just do it with me on myself. But the first one we wanted to congratulate and award the prize of third place is Balancing Act, the bronze on aluminum base. Oh, I got that on the screen.
Great.
Yeah.
And is JC here with us? Vicky, can you see her?
There you go. Yes, I am. I'm on my husband's computer, so I look like Jeffrey, but
I would love it if you guys had some questions for her and what your thoughts were about her piece in particular.
I can tell you where it came from. We were in Vancouver on a ferry, and I saw a young man standing on the edge of the Fraser River with a log over his head. And I said, that's a sculpture. And it took me about 4 years to come up with the concept of ecological balance and man's place in the world. So it's a bronze, it's about 5 feet tall. And it actually sold out of this show and is now at the Glenn Urquhart School in Beverly, Massachusetts. It's a grade school that emphasizes ecological and nature. So it's in a good place.
Do you, Mr. Pucker or Rose, have any questions for her?
I don't have any questions. I'm both thrilled and delighted that people still are casting in bronze. The people like David Aronson that we dealt with for many years passed away. Foundries were a major issue to find a foundry or foundries that could cast, and then the patinas. Where was this done, and where did you work on it? Was it done in clay originally?
Yes, I work in plastiline and then a rubber mold. It's actually, I'm in a second casting right now. I work with the Campbell Foundry up in West Rutland, and I also work with the Green Foundry in Elliott, Maine. I work with the two foundries. I do bronze, but I also do stone. So I'm currently working on some pieces that are combining stone and bronze. So. But I've started working large. You have a gallery, but most galleries, I've outlived a bunch of my gallerists and being in my 70s. And I found that the way to show is to show in outdoor sculpture shows. So I started working much larger than I originally did. But I do love bronze, and I keep my editions small. I never do more than 6. And then I destroy the mold. So.
That'll do it. That's a good way to make sure it isn't cast again at the same size. Good for you. It's also nice to know that you were able to place it in an environment that is concerned with the issues that you believe the work is concerned with. That's not often the case, so it's a tribute to both you and to whoever has it now.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, for these castings, are they ever site specific that you're creating these works, or is it just intended for an outdoor environment?
Some of my site-specific ones are large stone stele that have been done that way. No, it generally, for example, I have a female counterpart to this that's in the foundry right now, which is a woman's balancing act, where she's standing on her head and balancing a large ball on her feet with a smaller ball on top of it, which as a woman, we have to keep all the balls in the air while standing on our heads. So that's the bronze that's going to be the counterpart to this one. I often do a male and female yin yang kinds of, take a concept and do the male view and the female view. So anyway. So specific, not particularly, no, they just, other than the large stone pieces.
Well, just in terms of us looking at these pieces, coincidentally, this in the order that we were reviewing was relatively at the beginning, and we went through a couple immediately. You know, we're arguing, and this one, both of us stopped and said yes. Both of us immediately were very drawn to it. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so our next award winner.
Roll again. All right, Mr. Pucker, do you want to announce the second one?
No, you're good. I like the way you read it, so go for
All
it.
righty, all righty. And so the second one is Devonte cast bronze 40 by 20 by 20.
Hi. That would be me. It's an incredible honor to win this prize. And I was just really struck by everybody's work and how much of it had to do with nature, our environment, and inner balance and inner peace. And some of the pieces that we look at, they really bring about this feeling of peace. And I guess we can then act out of inner balance much more easily. And the idea for this piece went back, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. And I was in Greece at the temple of Nike. And as you know, that was Nike, the Nike of Samothrace is of course one of the most famous sculptures in the world. And it's fascinating because of its movement. And then I thought, I wonder what it's like. What is it like for nature? Or is nature changed by having a temple like that nearby? And how do the forces of nature inscribe themselves into like, let's say, the wood or something? And so then I found a piece of wood there. It looks like this. And I used that as a springboard for creating this sculpture and reading the script of nature and then going into the sculpture and then really imbuing it also with our human striving and what do we stand for in the world. And as I then described in the description of the piece, the uprightness and the moving forward and to being undeterred and persevering and kind of having courage and rising above circumstance, and which was of course also a theme of the original Nike sculpture, and finding a modern voice for that. And then usually I work my pieces in porcelain first. So this is an example here behind me of a different sculpture. I really like working in porcelain because it's so extremely responsive. And then of course it's super scary to bring it to the kiln when it's so delicate, and then to see how it makes it through the bisque firing. And so far that's been very successful with each piece. And then I had this actually, I had this piece cast in 2 sizes and in 2 different places. And one of them was cast in Kingston with workshop art fabrication. And then this particular piece was actually cast in China and then shipped here because it's much more affordable. And yet I really love having the bronze, and it can, that it can really live outside in a larger environment. And yeah, I think very strongly about public sculpture, sculpture in public places, to bring the art to people, where people are and where people gather and where people sit and have coffee and whatever it is. And so I have a few public pieces out, and yeah, and hopefully this will also find a public placement. It's going into a big sculpture show at Sculpture Now at the Mount in Lenox, Massachusetts, where at least for the whole summer it's open to the public. Anybody can come and view it, and so that's exciting.
Well, congratulations. It is a most impressive piece. Not being able to see it in person, I think, makes it much more difficult to really appreciate the scale and the movement in the piece. In truth, what came to mind was a 1913 piece by Buccioni, who was a futurist painter and sculptor. And if you have a chance just to Google that image, you'll see that it's a running, moving figure, but in with great energy. And this is more lyrical, but
yes.
Responds very much to that sense of fluidity and movement in quite a beautiful way. So I was very pleased that we were able to agree on this as one of the prize winners.
Definitely. Yeah, I think
Thank you
it's
so much.
Just so striking, and again, to capture such fluidity. And I've learned again from this process just how difficult and unusual bronze casting can be. So congratulations to both of you guys for accomplishing that.
Also, the use of porcelain as your base medium before you cast it is impressive. A number of the artists that we work with, Brother Thomas, Hideaki Miyamura, Hanwei Lee, all work in porcelain, and the general description of that is trying to work with cream cheese to the extent of getting it to hold the form. So this is an impressive presentation as well. Do you biscuit at a certain point? Is that what you're doing then? Do the enlargements? How do you...
So they're usually about 20 inches tall or 22 inches tall, and really it takes several months to make, let's be honest. And then, you know, controlling the moisture, and it's really tough. And then once it's totally dry, I sand it.
Okay.
And then I have a wonderful friend, Millicent Young, who is a sculptor herself, and she has a kiln that she then, it's not computer programmed, it's actually hand operated, and she fires it over 4 days. She really knows how to do that. And so that's why I don't have any accidents with it, because she's, you know, herself a sculptor and such a sensitive person that she can, you know, bisque fire it for me. And then the 3D image file gets created by somebody else. And then of course you can print it out any size you want and make it any finish you want. So,
great.
And then that computer 3D file that gets then sent to the foundry.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Rose,
Thank you.
The last one.
Last one, but not least, is Certain About Uncertainty, stoneware, stains, glazes, blown glass, 13 by 11 by 11.
Hi, would be my work. My name is Natasha Rikareva, and I I'm a ceramic, mostly sculptor. So this work has been created during the pandemic, and I call myself positive poetic surrealist. She's like a hybrid creature, which is half octopus and half woman's body. She holds the pearl in her hand to help her to be grounded during these difficult times. She has a third eye on her forehead to help her to foresee the future. And the poetry is describes her state, and we are all trying to balance now in these difficult times. I'm also from Ukraine, and I have my family in Kiev now, and so we're trying to find this comfort, even being uncomfortable, and to find the wisdom from the internal sources. Because into the unknown, there is nothing to fear. So this is my work. I also started blowing glass a couple of years ago. So I like to combine stoneware or porcelain with blown glass pieces. And I think it works really nicely together. So at first I blow glass. I have a very traditional way of approaching this non-traditional sculpture because I like to sketch in my sketchbooks a lot. And then I make a maquette, and then I blow glass in order to see where the clay pieces will be combined in, and then I use a special glue to adhere the clay parts into the glass parts. and somehow I see my sculpture, and the second prize winner, not myself. So yeah, that's about it. Do you have any questions for me?
I would just say that what attracted me particularly to the piece was the sense of the uncomfortable, not your normal sculpture of an individual. Obviously, the combination of the octopus or the legs and the human face plus the headdress, which I think is quite fantastical. And if people have visited the gallery over the years, they know that at least my inclination is to some things that are sometimes called weird. I find that it provides us with an access to aspects of the human condition because they are out of the ordinary, and therefore they allow us to engage with ourselves beyond what normal expectations are. So this piece certainly responds to that criteria, and it was fun to have found it amongst the other pieces. It has an inner personality to it that was attractive to me.
Thank you. Her headpiece is supposed to represent the helmet. So it protects her, at the same time gives her the ability to see into the future.
I'm not sure any of us want that ability right now, but we certainly hope for the best.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
I was also, I was just curious for sort of you spoke about, I guess, how different aspects of the subject connect to different themes. So not typical, seeing into the future, helmet being protective. Is this like a character that you've ever worked on, or did she sort of come together from her different parts?
Well, that's a great question. We all, as artists, we have tendency to do certain things. Sometimes people say, oh, she looks like you. So it could be all of your works are self-portraits. She's not a particular character. She just appeared because of my love to the octopus also, because I find them so fascinating as creatures. They have 3 hearts, they have 9 brains. They're the most sophisticated creatures they could escape. And I've done series of works whether I would draw them on my sculptures, or I would sculpt them, or I would make a steam in the shape of an octopus. So there is that thing that you have certain themes that you are repeating, and they're just as a channel. I find myself as a channel. So we don't live in a vacuum, and then we respond with what's going on in the world. And this piece was done during the pandemic, where we all were really hit hard with all this uncertainty. And I would, as this piece is titled Certain About the Uncertainty for quite a while. So as a channel, you channel, but then you use your like a dictionary of your symbolism. It goes through your art. And this is how the octopus, the glass, the face, and I don't have, like usually I don't repeat the helmet is only there. I don't have it anywhere else. It somehow appeared in this work, and it might be repeated somewhere else if I feel like it, but probably not, because there will be multiple ideas which will come through me. And but the face, the character itself, could be resemblant to some other characters that I've done before. So I hope it answers your question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And so I think, Mr. Pucker, And I had a couple questions and a couple just quotes also to share and maybe spur a little bit more conversation with the artist. I think perhaps going in the order that we just went in would be maybe easiest, because I'm curious for all of your thoughts, but we wanted to share 2 quotes by Brother Thomas that share a similar essence, and sort of Mr. Pucker will kind of do a more pointed question afterwards. But the first one is, art is only a means when there is something interior to share, and when there is not, it is not art, just another thing. And the second quote is, art is not an occupation. At some point, it becomes a state of being, becoming something from which you can never retire, an interior bush that never burns out.
So both of those quotes touch certainly upon some of the earlier conversations already as to the notion of creating something that is an extension of who the creator is, and that it has to grow out of that authentic inner voice that certainly all of you have presented already. And the second question really relates to the fact that, for the most part, the art that is shown to us, that people ask us to share, comes from those people who are artists because it is a calling, not because it is in fact a way to make a living or to get on in the world, but rather that, and Thomas's reference is essentially to the burning bush at the very end of it, that it is a need that motivates, that encourages, that energizes each of you to create the work. So both of those questions have always been at the center, now in retrospect, after over a half a century of our pursuit and sharing of art, and wondered where each of the 3 of you or others of you respond to those questions and your own approach to the art you make.
I know that I have to do art. I can't not do it. My husband will say, "You're crabby. Will you please go out to your studio and get it out of your system?" He knows when I get so frustrated. I draw a lot of my inspiration from the news, the New York Times, I've been a sculptor since the 70s. And so my viewpoint has changed, but I have a piece that I did when Kosovo was having problems. It's a Kosovo Madonna. I do representational work. I love the human body, so it's always representational. This could be a Ukrainian Madonna. It's the same idea of women in jeopardy. And so that's where I draw mine, but I have to do it. I can't not do it. And I've had to do it since I was about 4. So it's always been my vocation.
That's fantastic. The issue of creating figurative sculpture in the 20th and 21st century seems to have been, certainly figures have left the canvas.
Mm-hmm.
Most part, they've left the drawing world. And part of the discussion is, has mankind, has the human figure, meaning the human being, really lost the center of the universe by not being represented, whereas you're committed to figuration. But from what I see, certainly shown in museums today, the vast majority of them are installations or neon lights or accumulation of words that somehow become a substitute for figuration, for being willing to commit to the exploration of us as human beings.
The human body, though, can be used as a metaphor for so much. I mean, even with balancing act and the 2 balancing acts, I'm saying something more than just this is a beautiful human body. I'm making a statement about our place in the world. I have an early piece that's called An African Pietà, which was based on a Christian concept of a Pietà, a mother mourning over a child, that is from the starving people in Ethiopia. So you can, but I'm making a statement about mothers mourning as well as Africa and all the rest of it. So Melanie knows me well, and she knows that I'm always working with the human body. So.
Well, there's obviously the Katie Kollwitz Pietà that's in Berlin.
Yes.
of her dead son that she's holding underneath the cupola. And again, the ability for the world to respond to that kind of statement seems to be both apparent on CNN today verbally, but it hasn't yet succeeded in deterring tyrants from going around and killing people.
Yeah.
So the question that we've been wrestling with, especially with the Bach exhibition today, is, so what is the role of art in the context of a world being assaulted on an ongoing basis? Should we just not make it anymore? Should music not exist any longer? Because they haven't served as active deterrents to individuals like Putin.
Well, I don't think that we can negate them. Unfortunately, Putin isn't listening to what we're listening to, but I think we can underline things that are happening in this world. We can emphasize them and bring attention to them, whether it's with abstract or figurative work. So that's what our message is. If you're not understanding what I'm saying, then my work isn't working. I'll put it that way. And I do have some that I don't like, that I've sort of consigned to the scrap heap because they didn't get the message across that I want to get. But I think my work, even in my stonework, which is a lot of slightly more abstracted animals and figures, I'm still trying to say something about the natural world and about the world we live in.
Wonderful. All right, and then to Martina.
Yes. Well, just like the previous speaker, I've also made art since I was 4. I remember standing in kindergarten and looking at the pictures that were on the wall and trying to figure out, well, how did the artist do that? So that goes back as far as I can remember. And luckily, I went to a school where there was a lot of art that happened every day. And to me, really, the turning point came when I was 17, and a teacher said, well, have you ever heard about Kandinsky's book about the spiritual in art? And that was like a huge big bell that went off. And then I went to the university library and picked up that book and started reading about the spiritual in art and what Kandinsky had to say. And then that has really been a theme that's been with me for really throughout my artistic career. And although most of my work is abstract, I have, of course, worked figuratively forever also, especially as an art teacher. You know, you need to be able to draw faces and draw people and be able to create as with the human figure as a center. And I like what you said, Mr. Pucker, about, yeah, the human beings really at the center of everything. And have we replaced them with neon lights or, you know, interesting kind of word collages and things. And but I think the abstract also affords a way of expression where also, let's say in painting, you know, the red of the color isn't really confined to the tulip or the barn or something. It can really freely flow and find its own form. And I find the same is also true about with the sculpture, that the inner movement that our soul creates by, and I do a lot of, actually, you know, to be honest, I always meditate before I create, so that whatever flows through me is less every day and hopefully a little bit more of a larger concept that lives with humanity and, you know, great spiritual documents and things that I then like to dwell on. And then what happens out of that inner movement, that our human soul is able to really raise itself to a much more divine state of being maybe. And then what comes out of that as we are moved like that. And that has really flowed into my work for, I want to say, the last 30 or 40 years. And yeah, I think that's really the essence. And of course, one as an artist, you cannot help but to create. And it doesn't really matter if anybody buys it or anybody likes it or whatever the feedback is, you can't help it. And you don't ever want to help it and know you will never retire from it. It's so exciting. Yeah. Any more questions?
Rose, I can't hear you, so.
Oh, I said I was good for questions for this round, and then for Natasha for the last
Thank you.
response to again, art being something
Yeah.
interior, something to share.
We belong to the same group, I think. I also started what I remember myself since I was 2, drawing. My mom was a composer, and I used her notes and the walls and everything I can find to express myself visually. So they didn't have any choice, my parents, but to put me in numerous of art schools, and then they went to art studios, art schools, and the education back in Ukraine is very strict, and you have to start very classically with the still lifes and heads and landscapes, and I have a very traditional background, and if I did what I'm doing right now, I would be kicked out from the school over there. But I'm so grateful because it gave me the tools, and I don't have to reinvent the bicycle. So I could, draw or paint with my eyes closed, faces or whatever you could see. And yeah, it is also my life. I don't, again, see myself doing anything else except teaching art, which is sharing my experience and creating. So if I don't have clay or glass or bronze, I also done some bronze sculptures. I would sculpt out of sand. I would paint. There is a wall behind me that I painted. So I didn't have any sculpting tools or materials. So I would take paint and I would paint, or I would draw during the summer when we would go outside Kiev. I would take with me huge sketchbooks, and I would just create lots of sketches or final drawings. So yes, that's what we do, and it's our life, and it really doesn't matter as Martina mentioned, whether it sells or it doesn't sell. It's actually sometimes if it sells, I don't like it as much. If I'm saying lately to myself, not because I want to keep the work, I would like the world have it, but sometimes if it sells too fast, it's like it's not, it hasn't been enough in the exhibitions, and yeah, I don't know. It's not the criteria for me that the work is good. I have to evaluate it first in order to see the world. So yeah, I agree with the previous speakers that it's not as important for us to have the positive feedback. Well, it is important, but it's not the main force. The inspiration comes from the world, from what's going on with us, with our lives, and with the lives of people who surround us. And it's so interesting. My faces were so serene before this war. And now, if you take a look at my Instagram or social media where I share my work, they're so different. They're opening their mouths, they started to have wrinkles. They have this very intense expressions on them. So we do reflect what's going on in this world. And I hope it will be over soon and my faces will go back to being serene and peaceful and dreamy and positive. And there's still hope that the humanity will prevail and we will win. So thank you for giving me this award. It means a lot to me.
So let me, I think we're getting closer to the end of the conversation, but I do want to share three quotes, one of which in response to what you just said. Brother Thomas used to say, the art is not complete until it is shared with others. He wasn't talking about selling the work. So I think basically one of the things that he encouraged us to do was to get his works into museums. And so at the end of his life, which was in 2007, his works were in 75 museums around the world. And the goal there was to make sure that whatever he was saying in an inner way was being experienced or could be experienced by people all around the world. So I would certainly encourage you not to worry, as you indicated, about whether it sells or not, or it sells too quickly, but to realize that in making the art, because of your commitment to humanity, that it needs to be seen and experienced by others. There are a couple of quotes that I would just love to end with and ask them for responses to. One is, there's only one thing that measures art, and that is freedom, and certainly the joy of and the privilege of living in this country and being free to express. I'm now reading Ai Weiwei's 1,000 Years of Joys and Sorrows, and it is incredibly, incredibly sobering to realize what he has gone through and what creative individuals within China have gone through in the past 100 years. It's enormously, enormously depressing, if nothing else. And the other quote is one that I think informs most of what all of you have said, in particular the theme, and that is, we are not really whole until we take on responsibilities for others and for the whole world. And if nothing else, art can address those issues. Whether it can or cannot be effective is, I think, not the point, but rather the need to approach it as part of our commitment as human beings to engage with the world, just as your work, as you mentioned, and the faces have changed, is to also reflect the universe in which we're living and see if there's not some possibility of alerting people to the need to stop it and change it and make it better. So thoughts, questions, at least I don't know what your scale and program is, but it's been fun to be with you.
Well, I just want to thank you. This has been incredibly thought-provoking, very deep insights and teachings from you, which are much appreciated. And I'm sure all of us can feel that. And hopefully through this process of today, it makes us all better artists. It makes it more provocative and challenging in making art. So thank you. These quotes were incredible. And I'm certainly going to read a lot more at this point myself. So I just really deeply appreciate everything you did and the time and effort that you took to not only jury the show, but to be so inspiring at this point. So thank you very much. And I want to thank all the artists also for submitting and for all their work that they presented. As you said, you know, it's not just the work, it is our souls that are put into these pieces that we do create. And I hope you tell everybody about this so a lot of people can, you know, watch the video. I hope that all of our artists can post this on their Instagrams and social media, because this was a really incredibly powerful discussion that we had. And I think it needs to be shared. So thank you all for coming today. And again, Mr. Pucker, Rose, thank you so much for all of your time. It's really greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And thank you to the artists. I just wanted to say, I think in a world that's been completely dominated by men in every field, quite frankly, it's really awesome that in a completely blind test, and I'm assuming here, but 3 women who are vocal and active. I was writing down words that you guys were saying, things like fluid and persistence and responsive, and, you know, starting at young ages, and all of you kind of twitched at the fact of, you know, yeah, I was like, I don't remember it when I started, you know, I was young. It's what I do. It's who I am. And so it's, I think, really powerful to see that come from all 3 of you, and to see, there's a sense of sort of a natural responsiveness, but also responsibility. I think all of you are working on in your work, and I think that makes it all the more powerful, and everlasting.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you all very much. Does anybody else have a last comment, or are we wrapping it up? We're good? Okay, well, thank you again, everyone. Really appreciate today. Thank you.
Thank you. Be
Thank
well.
you.
Have a wonderful spring.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.